thought you were talking about August for a second, and I was like, we
Fuck
love
no.
August here.
I don't even want to mention his name. I don't even think we should talk about him. We should just skip past.
Hi guys, welcome to Lovecast BL Podcast. I'm your host Alexa. With me are my fellow hosts Pixie and Kayla.
Hey.
Yay! This week we are joined by a fellow BL content creator who we know and love, whose content has officially been recognized by the stars of today's episode. Freddie is with us today. Yay! Welcome, Freddie. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So for anyone who might not be familiar, do you want to talk a little bit about your content you make, where they can find your BL and K-pop stuff that you do?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, I'm Freddie. I would say I am a content creator general, but I'm a reactor, a media commentator. You can find me on TikTok at Freddy's_TT, my YouTube where I react to BL, which is Freddy's_YouTube, and then I also react on Patreon, which is Freddy's_Patreon. Thanks for
The
having me.
naming system is great.
Right?
Yeah, kind of confusing, like when you're trying to Google me, but
True, but
it's
at least
fun
you know where
content.
everything is.
Yeah.
Yes, so thank you for joining us today. I feel like when we decided we wanted to talk about Last Twilight, we had to invite you on because we know that you have been following along with the show, doing reactions throughout its airing. Um, it got recognized by Jimmy and C at
Yeah,
the finale event, like
I
you were
saw the
on the
picture. I'm just
screen.
like,
It was
dude.
so crazy. It was so crazy. Because like people were there at the showcase and were like tweeting me being like and I was like it was a flash second, but important to
You're
me.
like,
So
Still.
Yes.
absolutely.
Mhm.
No, it
Oh
was so
God.
cool to see and very well deserved.
Thank you.
So yes. Yeah, so we have a lot to talk about with this deep dive, from the initial plot to the way the series was executed, and of course, the polarizing finale. So I feel like we should just jump into discussing all things Last Twilight if everyone's ready.
Yes.
Yes.
Let's do
Yep.
this.
Okay. So to give a little synopsis for anyone who might not have watched or be familiar with the story, Last Twilight tells the story of Day, a boy whose eyes were injured in an accident, causing him progressive vision loss, and Malk, who is a person who is struggling to find work after coming off of probation. Malk stumbles upon the job opening of Day's caretaker, and what initially starts as a challenge for both of them, for Day kind of proving that Malk isn't cut out for the position, and Malk to prove to himself that he can kind of handle this bratty rich kid and everything he might throw at him. They kind of begin to develop into something more as they spend time with each other in true BL fashion. And together they kind of navigate Day finding his autonomy again after his injury, and Malk reclaiming his life after prison and the loss of his sister. So yeah, to just kind of jump into it, talking about the overall story and plot. Pixie, I know you said you had something you needed to say like right off the bat. So
Yeah.
do you want to
Yeah.
lead with that?
Yeah.
I'm
I
so
just need to
curious.
get this off my chest because, okay, it's not like a comment on how good or bad the show is. Not at all. It's just when I was watching the first episode, I was just sitting there and just like, I've seen this before. This is something I've seen before, and the premise of the plot is the exact same as the French movie The Intouchables.
Oh.
Yeah. So listen. I took some outcuts from the synopsis just to make my point because this was really like stuck in my head because I love
Uh-huh.
that movie. It's such a good movie. So the plot is like they're interviewing potential live-in caregivers. Driss, who's has no ambitions to get hired. He is only waiting to get a signature on a document proving his interview was rejected. Despite being uninterested and inexperienced, he does well caring for Philip, albeit using unconventional methods. A friend of Philippe reveals that Driss was imprisoned for 6 months for robbery, but Philippe does not care about Driss's past.
It really
Damn,
is
okay.
so similar.
Dude, if you go watch that movie, and everyone should watch that movie. It's so good. They made like a Hollywood version. Don't watch that. Watch the French one. It is so good, but it's complete copy of the story.
So
And I'm just like, not a comment to Last Twilight being good or bad. I'm just, but the original movie isn't like a gay story. Like it's just a bromance, and it's based off of a true story of like two people in France. So
Interesting.
that's what's it's just it was living in me, so I had to bring it up.
Fair point. Yeah, I mean, I presume from what I know, this Last Twilight wasn't based on a novel. The novel was like one of like Only Friends that was written in conjunction with the show, and it's kind of something that Piaf and the production developed because Piaf really wanted to do a story tackling disability. And I know he did say he was watching a bunch of like content about disabilities and media and stuff like that. So I think it's fair to say that it could have seen that and it could have inspired the plot. I don't want to say that it's like a copycat because that's a big like I mean
but if you watch the movie, like I'm just
Yeah.
saying, but yeah.
To be fair, it's kind of like a fanfic trope.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
That is true. I was watching it and I was just like, okay, when I realized that it was like really close to The Untouchables, I was just like, okay, this kind of feels like a gay fan fiction of that movie.
Yeah. I feel like when they're gonna do like a caretaker type or like sick, healthy trope kind of story, this is kind of the route that it goes. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
haven't watched a lot of caretaker X caretake E
Yeah.
media, but
What really struck me was like the attitude for the caregiver and like the whole imprisonment thing and all of that. So, but yeah, it's not a comment to if it's a good series or not. It's just yeah.
I was really like when I saw the trailer, I was really like, okay, how are they gonna handle the ethics of this? Because I
yeah.
know that some people already were like, I don't want to watch this because this is like, I don't know if they're gonna handle this well. And I
Yeah.
went into it being like a little bit kind of like on tenterhooks
Yeah,
of like,
yeah.
is this gonna be a nightmare?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
just silence.
And dot.
Silence. I mean,
No.
I do kind of applaud them for trying something different because we do have like a problem in Thai BL that it is very like the same. Everything is the same. So that they are actually trying to move a little bit out of the comfort zone. Great.
100%.
Maybe they should research more or
Yeah, no, I think and I think that's kind of part of what ties into why we're gonna have a lot of feelings later when we discuss kind of how the show ended because it was, at least for Thai BL, like tackling something that was very different. And like in talking, watching like the behind the scenes content and talking with, JimmySea for the interview and stuff like that. I feel like we kind of got a sense of how much they did put into the roles, and at least on the end of researching the characters and trying to understand playing a blind person. Now, that's always to say, it's always better to have people that actually exist in these roles playing them. So, recognizing that C is not someone who is blind, and that kind of already goes, I don't want to say takes away from the story, but it makes a difference in the way the story is portrayed. Having someone who is not visually disabled kind of taking on that role. But I think the fact that, they're willing to take it on, and it does seem like they did their homework in terms of
Yeah.
how to do that representation, and having a person on set who was blind kind of there to consult with them and consult with C and kind of make that believable.
Mhm.
It felt like they were really putting in the work to make it different and make it stand out, from like an execution standpoint,
Yeah.
which kind of makes the way kind of
I
toppled at
think
the end
that's exactly it. Yeah.
frustrating.
It's like it felt like all of that anxiety that I had before I watched it kind of just faded away as soon as I
You're like,
started
it's
watching because
going
I
so
was like,
well.
this is
Yeah.
so good. Like
Hmm.
I literally was just like, this is like so amazing. And then obviously, I mean, we'll get into the finale, but
Hmm. Hmm.
that was why that finale for me like was just so like I couldn't process it because I was like,
No,
this feels so different from how I felt about the show up until this point.
exactly it. And I know like Kayla and I have the same feelings. Is literally up until like episode 11, I was like, this is like one of the best shows I've ever watched. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Literally.
like, as I'm like, I've been waiting for the other shoe to fall for so long, and it
Yeah.
hadn't. And I was like, we're at episode 11, we might actually do it. And then,
Yeah.
stuff happened. But yeah, I mean, all that to say, I think a large chunk of it was still a very good show and was
Mhm.
executed very well. And
Yeah.
so like I'm glad that we at least had that, much of it that, it could have been a train wreck from the beginning. It could have just been a complete mockery of blindness and disability. It could have just, not put any effort in. And so I think the fact that a lot of it did go really well is like at least they put effort into trying to execute in a way that did justice to the story they were trying to tell.
I mean, it's progress. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
MTV doesn't have the greatest record of uh, doing shows with afterthought, but uh, it's progress. So,
Hmm.
I mean, we should still be critical to stuff like this, but at
Hmm.
the same time, acknowledge that they did actually try.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. So, kind of moving into thoughts about the acting, casting, the supporting cast, and stuff like that. Now, listen, I am the OG JimmySea truther on Lovecast.
You
Take
are.
me back to
I know
2022.
this about you.
I was on the vice versa train. I will talk about them every chance I can get. So, and perhaps it is biased, but like they acted down in these roles. Like, I love them and vice versa. Like, we know this. I love that show. I love the characters, but the acting in Last Twilight, especially for Jimmy, Malk is like my new most beloved character. I love him so
Yeah.
bad. Like, I feel like I loved Jimmy and vice versa, but his acting in Last Twilight just like took him as an actor to a whole different level for me. And I think for me personally, he was like the standout actor in Last
Mhm.
Twilight.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Coming in as like someone who hadn't seen Jimmy and C act before, I was like, where have these two been? I was
Hmm.
really missing out. I everything that you had said about them being so good before, I was like, wow, I should have listened to Alexa.
The
Sorry.
moral of the story is listen to Alexa.
Now I know. Now I'm aware.
Yeah, I personally like, because as we know, like I didn't like Vice Versa and I never finished it. And for some, like Jimmy for me in that was, he was too there was, I don't know, I can call it overreacting. For me, for my sake, like I thought, like a lot of it was very overacting, was very exaggerated emotions. But watching him in Last Twilight, there was like a, he was more like grounded and more subtle with how he acts and how he portrays his emotions and everything, which made it more believable and easier to watch. And I I loved their chemistry in this show, and just in
Hmm.
general, like I have nothing to like comment on the acting. It was, they were doing so good.
They were perfect. They were
Mhm.
so and Jimmy especially, like he just
Hmm.
him in this role was a revelation for me.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'd
Yes,
never
I'm
looked at
pretty
him
sure I
like
said
that.
those exact words at some point. Like
It
Jimmy as Milk was a revelation.
was a he just like I had never looked at him like that because I'd seen him in Bad Buddy, and I had
Right.
watched
Mm-hmm.
Vice Versa, and I also hadn't enjoyed Vice Versa. I actually came back to it, like, because I watched it whilst it was airing, and then I dropped it, and then I
Mm-hmm.
came back and watched the final few episodes, and I was like, oh, I don't know why I dropped this because this is actually a banger.
Mm-hmm.
But like in Last Twilight, I was like, these are two completely different actors. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're just the chemistry
Yeah.
firstly, and like yeah, just Jimmy was I was so convinced that he was Mark, like
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And the
Hmm.
the care that he had and the way that he like displayed that, it was so real. It was so
Hmm.
real for me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the emotions were just like I just feel like I felt everything they were feeling.
Yeah.
And I mean I think it's a testament to how much I don't know closer, how much workshopping and stuff Jimmy and C have done since vice versa because I know that when they were announced for Last Twilight, you know, people were skeptical because last or vice versa in general like I think people generally hold like Pixie's opinion and Freddie's initial opinion that like most people didn't love it. And so people were skeptical of like, can Jimmy and C like really be the ones to take on these types of characters? And I don't know, maybe they had something to prove. Like maybe they saw those comments and were out to prove everyone wrong because like they brought it 1000%. And I'm just like every week I was watching, I was like, I'm so glad P off tapped them for these roles because I feel
Yeah.
like people are really starting to see their ability and their range and like no matter what you thought about how the story ended, I don't think that takes away from how well they did
Hmm.
acting in the roles as Malk and Day.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course we have to talk about like Mark who
Mark.
is yeah. Yep,
Dude,
yep,
My
yep.
the
son.
dude was stealing the show in every scene he was like, how did I not know about Mark before Only Friends? Like, how did I not notice him before now? Like,
You should have
he's just
listened. That's my thing. You should
he
have
is a
listened.
god, okay?
He's a god.
He's no, I actually can't. Have you seen my Pixie? Have you watched My School President?
Yeah,
She watched
yeah.
part of it, right? I
Okay.
don't
Part
think
of
you ever
it, yeah.
finished it.
No.
Because I'm rewatching My School President on my
Uh-huh.
Patreon at the moment.
Okay.
Plug. Um, and I just can't get over it. He's such a good actor. He steals the scene at like every scene he's in that show as well.
Every single show he is stealing
Comic
every scene.
timing, emotions, like he can do it all with that
Yeah.
beautiful wavy
Yeah.
hair.
Yeah. Oh, he's so beautiful.
He's so
So
beautiful.
beautiful.
No, but really, like seeing Mark go from Tucson in My School President to Nick in Only Friends to Night in Last Twilight, I'm like,
Mm.
he literally like, and yeah, we talked when we talked about Only Friends, we talked about that being an opportunity for him to kind of show something outside of the comedic actor, which is what he'd previously been.
Mhm.
And I feel like Last Twilight gave him that opportunity in a way that was very different from Nick, because Nick was like a little bit like I love Nick Down and like I
Yeah.
like you know, but then like Night kind of had this like I don't even know
Confidence.
like
Confidence.
Mm.
the confidence and then like the
Mhm.
traumatic backstory with like the guilt around the accident and his relationship with his mom and like the way Mark acts with his eyes, like in some of like he would just be looking at like Day and the mom interacting, and my heart would just like shatter into a million tiny pieces. And I was like, if this woman does not start paying attention to her other son,
Yeah.
I will jump through the screen right now. Like he just made you feel all of the pain he was feeling around like his familial relationship.
Yeah. I don't really know
Yeah.
anything about Mark's life, but that man has been through something. I like 100%. You can't just pull that out of nowhere. Like there's some trauma there. There has to be.
Or
Yeah,
Truly.
he's
it
born with
makes
it.
me it
Or
makes
he's
me
born with
really
it.
it makes me really wonder why like GMMTV hasn't like both like with Mark and Neo and off like they keep putting them in like comedic roles when they like shine doing these like more serious grounded roles. I'm just like, why they're wasting potential.
Yeah, I think part of it could be preference because like Mark in real life, like he is so goofy and I think he
Mhm.
enjoys being like a goofy person. And like I think same with Neo and Off. And like I think we've talked about before too how like comedy can be just as difficult to play as
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
a more serious role, but it is like when you get to see them in something different, you're like, why didn't we get to see this sooner kind
Mm.
of feeling. Yeah. And then poor Jai, who I'm I am in love with Namtan. I feel like I don't know if I've said that
Valid.
before, but
So valid.
like she is so like oh and I loved that first of all I love a story where anytime a female character in a BL is not playing like the evil ex-girlfriend, it's a win. And even going beyond that and having her and Malk be such like good friends and so trusting in each other's confidants in life and kind of, her being that last person that Malk had besides, before he met Day, kind of like on his side and sticking with him. Like, I love the way that they portrayed their friendship. And I feel that like she just so easily fell into the role of poor Jai. And I just, every time she was on screen, I was like, I love her so much.
Yeah. I think I even said in my reaction, like, I can't believe that they've made me cry over straight people in a BL.
No, for
Literally,
real.
though.
They were the only good part of the ending.
Literally. They were so beautiful. I was like really crying. Like
No, I would
Yeah.
like
Mm.
the conversation that she had with Day and Night's mom, like before the wedding ceremony. I literally like did not even realize how hard I was crying until the scene finished. I was like,
Same.
what just
Same.
happened to me? Like, oh my God, her acting, both of their acting in that scene was like
yeah.
beautifully done. Like, but yeah, the whole wedding, like actual highlight of the finale,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
And
they were
if anyone wants to watch Alexa cry over Last Twilight, you can go to our Patreon where she reacted
true.
to every episode.
I did react to the whole series and I cried multiple times. It's fine. um, but yeah, no, that like that whole ending storyline of like, and I kind of put that as one of the topics we can dive into deeper, like single parenthood and how that impacts approaching relationships and stuff like that. Like the way they just pulled that out in the finale, I was like, I was not prepared for this, but like, oh my God, it was beautifully done.
Mhm.
All right. Any other commentary on like the cast, any other characters or people that you wanted to touch on? I know like there's also Day's mom. I feel like she was the other
Yeah.
main like supporting cast member who like I am not as familiar with the actress, but like I think, as I feel like playing mom characters like that can be like a kind of tough place because in some aspects she was kind of a villain at times and I was like, but at the same time like I don't know, it kind of taps into that whole single parenthood thing, especially towards the end you kind of like start to see her reasonings and I don't forgive some of the things she did, some of the things she said tonight
Yeah.
and stuff like that, but
Mhm.
I thought, I mean, the cast all around, like I don't think there was anywhere that people didn't shine in their roles
Mm.
basically.
100%.
I can just as a parent, parenting is hard. Okay, it's
Yes,
fucking
valid.
hard, and you feel like a failure all the time. So I
Mhm.
have some sympathy on stuff like I couldn't imagine doing it alone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to
100%.
remember his name, but Day's friend, loved him too.
Oh, um,
On? That's what it says on my drama list.
Like Master Om.
oh, yes, the his like his mentor.
Oh yeah, the blind
The
friend.
guy he would run with, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God,
Yes.
he was
Oh my
so
god, he was
funny.
so good.
Mm-hmm.
And they were
His
so cute.
energy.
Him and his wife was so cute, and the whole
Yeah.
story around like
Yeah.
them meeting and running together was just perfect.
Another example of making you care for the straights in a BL. Like
Literally.
Give me a
they were
break. That's
so
not what I'm here
cute.
for.
Who, like for real, who told you you were allowed to hit like that? Like, why is it so good? No, but he was so funny. I love the energy
Yeah.
that him and Day had together was always really funny to watch them. Um, I thought you were talking about August for a second, and I was like, we
Fuck
love
no.
August here.
I don't even want to mention his name. I don't even think we should talk about him. We should just skip past.
Yeah, that's why I like paused. I was like, August? No, Kayla would never.
No. I'm an August hater.
An
And you're
August
valid.
anti. No, but yeah, no, we don't have to talk about August. Um,
It feels so long ago because I feel like I'm so clouded by what happened at the end that I kind of forgot
li-
all about the August
Right?
literally
drama.
forgot about
Right?
Yeah.
August.
That's fine.
Especially because he also just like he like fucked up Day and then fucked off to America, and I was
I
like,
was
okay, good riddance, but also like
the way he did all that, knowing that he was gonna leave anyway.
literally
Sorry.
like the next day, I was like, bro, what
What's
the fuck
wrong
is
with
wrong with
you?
you? Oh, the feelings are
Mm,
back.
mm.
Yeah, no.
Anyway.
Anyway,
Segue on.
going on. Moving into the production aspects, like the editing, sound, direction, that type of stuff. Um, I mean, I feel like in general, I'm trying to think of, there were no really moments. I know, like, sometimes there are moments where you're like, why did this get edited this way? You know, what
Mhm.
happened with the audio here and stuff like that. And I don't have anything that really stuck out to me in Last Twilight. Like in general, I thought in terms of like editing and production quality, it was pretty
It was,
high.
Yeah,
yeah, it was pretty good.
agree.
I did like sometimes sit there and question the choice of um music.
Mm,
Because there are some, especially like in the first episode, there's some like traumatic moments, like when he loses the CD and goes down. Like I understand that it's supposed to be like a moment with panic for him, like trying to find it
mm,
and can't find it and all that. But I think the music being used is a tad too aggressive. Like I tone it a little bit down.
like the
And it
background
happened a couple
music.
of times. So I
Yeah.
just noted that they were using a tiny bit too aggressive sounds for some of the situations.
Yeah.
One thing that I loved was the NC scene that they had
Oh,
when they were in
yes.
the cabin, wherever it was, like in the mountains. The way that the lighting was so dark and the
Mm-hmm.
way it was edited, that there was not like a focus on the visual. It was I like was so emotional whilst I was watching that. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like, oh my god, JimmySea are getting it on. I was like, this is like a pure expression of love that I'm watching and like experiencing. Like
Yeah.
it was so deep, and like, and I think it was like a real credit to like the experience of them coming together and Day not having his sight or having limited sight
Mm-hmm.
in that moment. It was just that was really good for me. That's a
Mhm.
real standout scene, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was beautifully done. Like the way, like the angles that they chose, and
Mm.
like basically just having like the moonlight essentially as lighting the whole thing. Oh my God, it was so,
It was so
so
good.
gorgeous. Yeah, and kind of in that like same, I guess that was in the same episode, the editing on the scene at the end of episode 9, like with essentially the last Twilight, the way they edited like the visuals into the sky and everything like that, like oh my God. That scene I feel like is like a whole discussion in and of itself, but just from like an editing
Yeah.
standpoint of like kind of using the visuals to really show what Mulk was seeing through Day's description of the sunset, even though that's not really what was happening. And like he just opens his eyes and has this like gorgeous like oranges and reds and yellows and the sun flares and stuff like that on the camera lens. I was just like, this is cinema.
This is
This
cinema.
is cinema
For me,
for
that's
me. But yeah,
Mhm.
no,
yeah,
that,
no, agree.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to mention too that I really like the choice of fashion clothing
Mm,
in the show. Like
Mm.
how everyone
Same.
was dressed, and it was on point. It didn't feel like I often complain about things being new when you're talking about like poor
True.
characters.
Pixie speaking from a professional standpoint as someone who works with clothing for a living. This wardrobe gets Pixie's stamp of
Oh
approval.
my
Oh
god.
yeah, yeah. It because it's very jarring to me to see like people wearing new clothes all
Mm.
the time. Like that's
Hmm.
not real life. So, and I just noticed stuff like that. So I didn't like it. Didn't I didn't notice the clothes. Like they were
Mm.
on point to the point that they weren't distracting.
Hmm.
And it fit in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with Malk of someone who is supposed to be like working class, like seeing him like repeat outfits or like use the
Yeah.
same shirt in a different outfit is
Mm-hmm.
like something so small, but like you said, like it doesn't happen in
Mm.
BL or any type of media often. Like I just feel like everyone always is like in a completely new outfit all the time.
Yeah.
So seeing him like use the same overshirt in a different episode or the same t-shirt comes back around, like those small things like that, like
Mm-hmm.
like it actually speaks true to someone who probably does not have the money to have like a huge expansive wardrobe, whereas Day is this rich boy who has like all of his clothes organized by color and has
Mm-hmm.
them all set out and stuff like that, so it just felt fitting
Mm-hmm.
for the character. And that kind of reminded me of, in talking about wardrobe, I saw this translation on Twitter, and I think it came from like one of the behind the scenes videos of them talking about how Mulk's version of dressing up changes throughout the show. So like, when we first meet him, he is just like in his t-shirt and like the little overshirt and like
Yeah.
not you can tell he's not really putting any effort into things,
Mm-hmm.
but then like as things go on later and he's like looking to impress Day or looking to impress
Mm-hmm.
the mom, he'll have like his t-shirt tucked in and like he has like his
Yeah.
jeans cuffed and stuff like that, and like how that was like his version of dressing up and kind of like trying to make an impression, and I just
Yeah.
thought it was such a cute little addition and really fitting for Malk as a character, and I really like that.
Yeah. It's kind of
Also,
like when you're just falling in love and you start like taking more care of yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
also the
Mm-hmm.
the use of the graphic tees as well. That just reminded
Yeah.
me, like they had different significant ones that, and the
Yeah.
use of the pink fluorescent t-shirt
Oh,
when he was trying to
yes.
like get his attention. That was so emotional. But
Yeah.
there were like a few t-shirts that they were wearing that said something significant to like what was going on in the plot at that time that felt like
Mm-hmm.
a funny like nod to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And then you had like the fucking fart proudly shirt or whatever he was wearing, and like
That really
as-
took me out of that scene. I could not focus.
that, yeah,
Ugh.
the whole like BL just choosing random shirts that have like the most random phrases of words on them.
Yeah.
But no, in general, I did like really like the wardrobe, and I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was really well done throughout the show.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then I feel like the other thing to kind of talk about in this section is the music and the OSTs for the show,
Oh.
which I loved every single OST that they put out. I really liked the whole doing two different versions of the song that they sang in the car, and then Malk performed it at the bar, and they released that version, and then Day did like the acoustic version at the campfire later, and they released Day's version. Like I really, really like that they did that. I thought that was a really cool way to tie in a song that was used in the show into like the actual OST release.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
I really loved the OST for the show. It was really good.
Yeah.
Good sounds.
Good sounds.
Good sounds. Good for the
That's a
ears.
compliment coming from Pixie.
Actually, though. All right, so I guess now we can start diving deeper into some of the topics that we wanted to circle back around to. So the first one, I think it's one that Kayla added in here, which is talking about the representation of disability, how it was portrayed versus the way the series was marketed. And then, Kayla, you uh, reference Buell video about I guess the finale and the ending of Last Twilight, if you
Hmm.
wanted to jump in with that.
Yeah, so I guess we did talk a little bit about how like just the thought that I guess they put into portraying Day's character,
Mm-hmm.
but I was really interested in the marketing standpoint because I didn't realize this until I watched Buell's video, but on like all of the posters and promotional stuff for the show, Day is using the walking cane and
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't use it a single
Interesting.
time in the series. So I don't know. A lot of people were pointing that out as, I
Mm.
guess, an overall critique of the ending,
Mm-hmm.
because things did go downhill. Like the narrative, there was, we'll talk about it, but there was a very harsh like narrative switch. And
Yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people were
Mm.
referencing something as small as that wasn't actually that small. Um,
Right.
Yeah.
of an issue when you're talking about portraying this character who is blind. Um, but yeah, what did we think about like the overall representation in the show?
I think like I can't speak to it like as a disabled person, but
Mm.
one
Mm-hmm.
thing that was
Mm-hmm.
super great about doing reactions on YouTube was that I got a lot of commenters of people who were either like visually impaired or had
Mm.
cared for people that were visually impaired. It was kind of
Mm-hmm.
brought a lot of people to the forefront of the conversation that like usually don't get their stories heard, and I thought that was really cool. And it was interesting seeing their takes over time as the series progressed. And I would say from the comments that I got on YouTube, people were generally like really happy with the
Mm-hmm.
representation up until the final few episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
from what I've seen on Twitter as well, and Twitter can be like a massive minefield, as we all know. It does seem to be like very polarizing, with some people from the visually impaired community being like, I was really happy with how this was presented, and some people
Mm-hmm.
being like, this has really upset me. Um,
Mm.
and so yeah, what I've been trying to do like post the series and whilst the series was airing was just to try and take in as many perspectives as possible and kind of
Absolutely.
see what they felt like. I felt really, like I said, like at the beginning I was anxious about it, and
Yeah.
I felt like a lot less anxious about it as the series went on. And then the final two episodes I
Mm.
was like, whoa, what are we doing?
Switch
Surprise.
up. Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
No, I agree. I think in general, I do think that they kind of did their homework to do this in a way that was respectful as possible, for the most part, that they could, while having a visually abled person play someone who was going blind. Um, I think like one thing that would have been cool to see would like have been seeing more blind people, like maybe, or visually impaired people, like in the supporting cast. I know there are a couple scenes where they had them teaching classes, or I think there were some like background characters in like the scenes with the run and stuff like that. But I think the person who made the cameo in the finale as the person that Day is leading across the crosswalk was the consultant that they had on set, who had
Okay.
been like guiding and consulting C throughout like the series and the role. So I thought that was a cool tie-in.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think there's always room for, in shows like this, having more representation of, because there are visually impaired actors out there, and I'm sure there are visually impaired
Mm.
actors in Thailand. So I think there's always room to have more representation in that way. But in terms of having, someone like C playing this role and the story they were tackling, I do think up until the finale, most of the discussion I'd seen had been taking it in a positive light. And, speaking from, like Freddie said, an enabled perspective, I was seeing it in a positive light. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard topic to navigate because I think
Mm,
talking about having polarized views about the finale, there's no 100% correct way to do that because even
yeah.
people
Yeah.
within the community are taking it very different ways. So I don't
Yeah.
think there's a perfect way to
Everyone's.
do this representation, but
Yeah, people's experiences are gonna be different even
hmm
within the community, and I think like especially watching it from like having no barely any knowledge about it to begin
Mm-hmm.
with, you kind of go into it with like a caution, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
like,
Absolutely.
is what I'm seeing now the right thing,
Mm,
or eh, so I think it's, when you're watching a show like this, it's also important to like look up the community and see what people are saying about it. Just
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
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 I think what
Yeah.
was cool about it as a show was that it encouraged people. Like, I think a lot of people were looking into it, and it started a conversation around
Mm-hmm.
True.
disability
Mm-hmm.
presentation in BL and how to do it. I think because well, I mean, in my corner of the internet, I feel like everybody was concerned about the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like, okay, we're having this conversation and we are being critical of this, and this is a good, it's a good thing. I think it's
Yeah.
one of the things about BL is that it's still such a like emerging genre that is
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
growing and changing in real
Mm-hmm.
time as we watch and consume stuff and as things come out. So something like this happening kind of just contributes to that conversation. I think that's, I mean, we can, again, we can get into this when we talk about the
Mm-hmm.
finale, but um I think people want to be, because it is still an emerging genre and industry, people
Mm-hmm.
want to be fully supportive of it,
Yeah.
to be like, well, we've got this representation, or we we've got queer representation, we've got all of this stuff, we should be happy, we should be grateful, we should be
Yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
enthusiastic about this. Whereas actually from my perspective, I'm like, the criticality is even more important, because
Yeah.
that's how we grow and how it improves and
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
ultimately becomes better and stronger over time, rather than a flash in the pan.
Yeah. And like
100%.
the BL like genre as a genre has like, in the last couple of years at least, it's grown a lot.
Mm.
Like, if you think back to, I don't know, Waterboy, like it doesn't exist, but it's there. But if you just think back to that, that's not a lot of years ago, and
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
that's excuse me, but it's a shit show. So but it's grown so much because there's a wide audience that are critical even to the shows that they love
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
to make it grow.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
I
think,
love that point about just like, even if something ends up being a negative, it at least starts a discussion about it, because
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
that way about so many issues in BL.
mm-hmm.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to point that out. I feel like
Mhm.
that's a really
100%.
important point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think something that we've always like kind of talked about here is like when you have what may feel like harsh or extreme criticisms of something, I feel like
Mm.
that kind of speaks to how much you cared about it. So like I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of us felt so strongly about the finale because the show felt so impactful and we felt
Yeah.
like it was doing something really good. And so like having criticisms of Last Twilight or any other show doesn't necessarily mean that the show was overall bad, but I feel like it means that like we saw what it was doing and what it could have done overall and felt frustrated with that not coming to a resolution.
Yeah.
So I feel like the fact that people had such strong feelings about the finale speaks to what the show had been doing so far and what it had been eliciting from people in a positive way. And that's why like the finale felt so polarizing. So
Yeah.
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 I feel like if no one cared about the show, no one would have cared that the finale was what the finale was. No one would be
No.
talking
Yeah.
about it still at this point if it hadn't had an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There are so many
Mm-hmm.
shows that I've not cared about that I've just dropped, and I've never talked
Mm-hmm.
about them again. But for this,
Same.
it's like it's coming from love, and it's coming for me. Like, I come from an arts background
Mm-hmm.
where criticality, you were forced into being critical of
Mm-hmm.
everything. But actually, I see it as like genuine like love and care, because it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's you're encouraging something to get better because you want it to grow,
Yeah.
like you want it to improve. um
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Heather said in the chat that like it's a global market and it's trying to keep up with a global audience with like very different opinions from the Thai
Mm-hmm.
market. And so being constructive with our criticism allows it to continue to grow. And I feel like it reflects back on how the audience is growing and, kind of
Mm.
allows BL to engage with its larger audience. So, yeah, 100%.
that was something that came up as well, like on YouTube. I really wasn't anticipating when I started doing reactions. I thought I was just going to be reacting for international fans, but
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
actually the majority of my audience on YouTube is are
Or
Thai
Thai.
fans,
Yeah.
and
Interesting.
it was really interesting seeing the difference in opinions between what I was saying and what Thai fans were saying,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt really important to like factor in those opinions and
Yeah.
constantly like educating myself on the cultural context of, because as a British person commenting on a piece of Thai media, like
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
you have to like be aware of everything that's happening, and oftentimes that's something that there can be a bit of a clash sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it does
Absolutely.
feel like sometimes it's like Thai fans and then us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like it's interesting to me like that Thai fans are more and more like reaching out to the internationals
Mm.
and just it's very good that like we're sort of starting to blend a little bit together and listen to each other
Mm.
because while the fans in Thailand will have one way of thinking of things, it's still like it's important for us to know what they think and they know to what we think so that
Mm-hmm.
like none of us are like the right opinion, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of need the blend of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
100%. Okay. A little bit tangenty got into talking about,
Yeah.
but I think it was a good discussion. Um, so one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about that I think they kind of touched on in the show, but not to like any certain extent, was Day's privilege when it comes to medical care and access. So first of all, with the surgery, they did mention that like the surgery has like such a small, like 0.001% or something, I think they said, of that surgery happening, and the fact that they had two opportunities to have the surgery. I know I've seen people describe it as like it was almost like a fantasy at that point, that
Mm.
it
Mm-hmm.
came up twice that he was able to be moved to the top of the list essentially for the surgery. And I feel like
Mm.
some people, I feel like it's kind of like what was touched on with Tien in A Tale of a Thousand Stars, how like they kind of worked like his richness like was
Yeah.
very much a plot point that he got his surgery because of
Mm.
who his parents were and
Yep.
the status that he had in society. And so they didn't explicitly mention that in Last Twilight, but I feel like people just kind of accepted it as canon that because Day's mom is a
Mm.
famous chef and he has this level of privilege, like that's, I mean, there are miracles that happen and people get moved to tops of lists and their time comes, but to have two opportunities within 3 years to have such a rare surgery, it's like you kind of like, would it
Yeah.
really happen? There's certain like you think about like the
Mm.
factors that might be at play there. Um, and even so much as him being able to afford a caretaker to
Mm.
be in his home almost every day, however many days a week that he was working, is something that many people don't have the privilege for. I mean, I know I'm
Mm.
very much speaking from the side of the American healthcare system and how that functions. I don't know the intricacies of the healthcare system in Thailand, but being able to have a caretaker who comes into your house every day and is with you most of the day is like, I feel like that's a huge privilege for a lot of people in terms of care and access. So even like that's something to consider as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's part of like the healthcare in Norway, but you need to like there's a long process of actually getting someone
Hmm.
to help you. So it can be like a waiting list for years to even
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't even get into the UK health system at this point. It's not looking good.
Oh no.
It's not
I've seen
looking
some
good.
TikToks. So I can guess.
Oh, mm,
Yeah, I think a lot of healthcare is like lists and waiting
Mm.
and
yeah,
stuff that seemingly day. I mean, we don't know how long well, I guess they kind of talked about in the show that he had like cycled through multiple caretakers at that point.
yeah.
And I don't know
Mm.
like if his may presume his mother was like privately hiring them. I don't know what that
Mm.
situation was, but
I think from the contract that she gave
Yeah.
him, it was very
it was
much
like
like
her
I'm
like a
just
private
Her own,
hire.
yeah.
yeah.
Um
Because
so
like
like
if he was like an actual, he would have had to go through like checks and like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
couldn't have just hired some guy. Like it
Yeah.
was
Just
Some guy
literally
off
just
The
some
guy
guy
cleaning the
some guy.
aircon.
wasn't even officially at the interview. Like, yeah. So, I mean, that, like, being able to privately hire a caretaker versus waiting for one from the state or government, just like,
Mm,
um, I think they very lightly touched on like Day calling himself like a spoiled rich kid and being
Mm.
referred to as a spoiled rich kid. But I think the discussion of how wealth ties into healthcare, I mean, it's
Yeah.
a big discussion, but
yeah.
I
it's
I would say like you couldn't have this plot, this story without Day being rich.
Yeah.
100% no.
Definitely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
And
Like his
yeah.
wealth made so many things in the plot possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is one of the like settings that I'm fine with them like having this rich kid and this
Mm-hmm.
poor kid in like a trope. Sometimes in BLs, I feel like they just put that rich guy in there to just like to make him be like the bigger prize or whatever for the poor
Mm,
kid. So I like the dynamic in the premise of the plot.
yeah. No, I agree. I think in terms of like the way that their socioeconomic differences were included in the story, I think it was well done and pretty reflective of reality. I think,
Yeah.
especially with a character like Mulk, like we touched on, a lot of the times, characters who are meant to be working class or poor don't really come off that way in shows. So I think, he was an example where um, you kind of have that more closer to reality. It's still drama, it's still a fantasy, but there
Mhm.
was a lot more aspects of reality, I think, in his depiction of a working class man than in some other shows we've seen.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't feel like Day really, I mean, and this is a problem that I have with the end of the show again, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, and I don't know if this is writing or characterization in this way, but I just don't feel like Day learned really much about Monk or his backstory or his
Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
context or learn a lesson about his own privilege or
Mm.
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
No.
I feel like he was
No.
he was getting there, but with the way that the series wrapped up, I
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
felt like there was a complete. It was very centered around uh the disability, which is obviously like super important.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Mm.
I would kind of question why even have Mock's backstory to be that he's like poor and he's been to prison and whatever if you're not
Mm-hmm.
gonna like add that into the relationship dynamic and
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
have the characters explore that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I had a moment at the end where I was like, does Day even like him?
No, I
Mm-hmm.
literally thought the same thing.
I feel like
Because
that was a
it
common sentiment. Yeah.
really, really felt like Day was so hung up on August that like he was just like, okay, I guess August, I don't have a chance, so I'm gonna just toy with Mook in a way. I don't know if like
Mm-hmm.
toying with him's the right word, but just like entertain Mook's
Mm-hmm.
feelings for him. But literally, even by the end of the series, I was like, does it's it seriously is like, does he even have a vested interest in this other
Mm,
person? Like, does he even
Mm-hmm.
care about Mulk beyond just like surface level?
mm.
Was I don't know, it didn't feel satisfying, I guess, for their
Mm.
relationship to kind of end like that or close
It
off like that, whatever.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because it makes me think of, and I feel like this point, like our discussion is kind of just bleeding into talking about the finale episodes anyway, so I'm just kind of going with it. But there's this moment when the scene when Malk is talking with Day's mom, and he says like, I feel like Day sees something in me that I don't even see in myself,
Mm,
because they kind of touch on the whole reason that Malk feels drawn to Day and feels comfortable with Day is because Day doesn't see him as someone who just got out of prison. At least that's how
Mm-hmm.
Mulk feels. And
mm,
I feel like Kayla kind of talking about the finale narrative and Freddie mentioning like, does he even know like what Mulk has been through, or like he doesn't acknowledge it at least.
Mm.
I feel like it kind of like almost undermines those feelings that Mulk had so strongly about like Day being the one person who sees past like the ankle bracelet and the fact that he's coming out of prison, and all this stuff, which was like very significant for Malk and was like a huge part of his narrative. And I
Mm.
feel like, tying into the finale episodes, like how Mulk's entire narrative just kind of like didn't exist, I feel like it
Yeah.
almost kind of undermines those strong feelings that he had about Day, and Day seeing beyond who he was in society in the earlier episodes.
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
and like they had these whole like outbursts of like, when Day's mom kind of, I don't know, not outs, but outs that, Mulk had been to prison. She did a background check on him. And, Day was like, well, I don't care because he's the only person who treats me like a normal person. And like Mulk was kind of having the same feelings about Day. And I feel like it almost kind of like undermined that, like essentially in the final
Mm-hmm.
episodes. And I feel like,
Mm.
I don't know, I just have a lot of feelings about how Mulk's narrative ended in the show. And I
Same.
feel like it
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I don't want to say takes away from, but now that I'm thinking back on like all these things that I found significant in the earlier episodes, I'm like, why did the finale do all of these things so dirty almost?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, towards the end of the show, Mock became one dimensional, which
Mm-hmm.
was like he
Mm.
just got like flattened into
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a representation of a person rather than like a fully fledged person. Whereas like up until that point, I mean, it's what we were talking about Jimmy's acting. It's like there was
Mm-hmm.
such a connection to him as a character, and he just was so brilliant. And then suddenly at the end, he was just like again
Mm-hmm.
some guy instead of
Just
like
some
Yeah.
guy who
Yeah.
who showed up again. Yeah.
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 Um.
I literally referred to him as a plot device for
Mm-hmm.
Day because that's what it felt like at the end was that
Yeah.
everything revolved around this successful surgery for Day and Mook was just kind of there like, yay, I
Yeah.
support you.
But I don't know
And
But did Mook
if
ever get supported is the question.
right. Because like even talking about the breakup, which I know people had a lot of mixed feelings about the breakup, like Mulk admits during the breakup why he is so afraid to leave Day, and he finally had this moment of him outwardly speaking his trauma around his sister killing herself, and him feeling guilty because he did not answer her call that night, and being terrified that that's going to happen again if he leaves Day, which is why, and like, I was so like, I've been waiting for them to address Mulk's
mm,
trauma the entire show. And I was like, we're
mm,
finally having this moment. He's finally putting it all out there. Like he's finally like speaking his piece, completely not acknowledged at all. Like, oh my God, it's making me so angry just
Mm,
thinking about it again. I'm like, he didn't acknowledge it in the moment. He didn't acknowledge it when they came back together. Like, I'm like, why did he like such a big moment for him that just
Mm.
like did not ever, it wasn't given the
what was the
importance it should have been
point?
given.
Yeah.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
then
why did him opening up about his sister's suicide turn into him pitying Day when he literally never did?
I was like, this is this whole thing, the whole reason that like Mock had chosen not to take the job. I was like, it's not about Day. This is the one part of the show where this isn't. It had nothing to do with Day, and people
Mm-hmm.
disagreed with me on this. But I was like, this is about Mock, like wanting to protect himself and making a choice for himself and having
Mm-hmm.
agency over his life. And
Mhm.
he shouldn't have lied.
Mm-hmm.
Like he shouldn't have lied.
Yeah.
Um, but like I just did not perceive that to be about pity whatsoever. I saw that
Mm-mm.
as like self-protection and like
Mm-mm.
Mm.
wanting to keep people close.
Mm.
And a lot of people argued, well, he had this opportunity and he was denying himself his life. It's like that's actually centering career, whereas that's not necessarily like everybody's priority. And like
Yeah.
keeping people that you love close is like really important to a lot of
Mhm.
people. But then again, that actually came up as like a cultural thing that I was
Mm.
interpreting as like from
Mm.
a British perspective.
Right.
Whereas a lot of Thai viewers were like, no, this is really important and this would be, so
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think it's I feel like I could understand. I think the thing that bothered me is like I understand why what Mok did read today as pity. Like I understood from Day's perspective how he got to that point, but it
mm,
bothered me that he didn't listen to Mok when Mok was being honest and telling him that that's not what it was. And then
Mhm.
when it came back around in the finale, it felt like Mulk had basically just conceded and was like, "You're right, I pitied you and I'm sorry." And I feel like that should have been, it could have been a much more nuanced discussion about what Mulk was actually feeling at that time,
Mm.
why he made the decisions that he made, why Day interpreted them the way that he did, why it read to pity as Day versus what Mulk was feeling internally, and externalized and said out loud. And I just feel like it just kind of fell flat in the end, and they didn't. It could have. I mean, it could have been resolved a lot better than it was if they'd kind of had a more nuanced discussion there in the coming back together, I think.
I think that's why the breakup was so frustrating, because
Mhm.
it just completely cut off all communication. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, there's no, this has happened to me, you've upset me, goodbye forever. And
Mm-hmm.
it was like, well, if you want to work on it and you want to build a relationship and you actually want to understand each other, you have to talk about it.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it felt really frustrating as well, because the whole like I maybe I'm a cynical hag, but like a 3 year gap. I'm just like,
Mhm.
how realistic is it, especially when you're like in your 20s, for you to maintain those feelings for a person? And I was just,
Mhm.
it felt suddenly fantastical in a
Mhm.
series that had felt so real, that
Mm-hmm.
it really kind of, I just was like, I don't buy any of this. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
buy the realism of this anymore.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they were like, we have an hour and a half to get these two back together, and
Mm.
they're like, we're basically gonna do anything we cut any quarter we need to make it happen. And I'm
Yeah.
like, at that point, I almost would have preferred like the open ending, which like typically I'm not a
Yeah.
big fan of like
Mm.
an open ending. They see each other again at the very last minute, and you don't really know what's gonna happen. But I feel like in this case, it almost would have been more beneficial because it would have given more room to see some actual like acknowledgement of what the characters had been through in that period of time. Um, but I don't know.
I
Yeah, it
mean,
just felt like they
if
go
they
ahead.
decided, like, I haven't seen the last episode, just I've heard about it, but if
Mm-hmm.
they had decided to like remove the whole plot device or the ending where he gets the surgery and everything and just focused on acceptance on his situation and their communication, that could have worked
Yeah.
better, and given time to that, uh, rather than go for the happy ending.
Yes, because they had this whole
Mm-hmm.
montage of Day living this fulfilling life. He went back to school. He was giving speeches. He opened a bookstore that was like catered towards like and focused on like blind individuals and making that bookstore accessible to them. And it was all like a montage in the first 20 minutes of the episode. And we didn't even
Right.
see Malk in Hawaii like leveling up and like honing in
Mm-hmm.
his skills as a chef and taking this big opportunity that, they
Mm-hmm.
made such a big deal of. And I think it kind of goes back to the whole idea that like they turned the finale into this whole like focus on him finally getting the surgery and getting his vision back when it could have been focused on all those things that they just pigeonholed into the first 30 minutes and made like basically a montage of all those scenes that I think for the audience would have felt more important and more impactful to focus on in the finale,
Yeah.
at least from the audience that I was seeing online, which,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
like we said, a lot of people, there were people who enjoyed how the finale was done.
Mm-hmm.
So, at least I would say for the audience who had criticisms of the finale, I think focusing on what we saw in the beginning that didn't really get the airtime it was deserved or owed, I think focusing on that more would have made for a more impactful finale versus like going into the surgery and making that the focus of the finale.
Mm-hmm.
I think like it's like the difference between viewing something or creating something like through an intersectional lens.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Mm-hmm.
buzzword, but like
Mm-hmm.
an intersectional lens of like, okay, well, like, yes, there is a person with a disability, but there's also a person from a lower socioeconomic background,
Mm-hmm.
and they're queer, and there's this and there's this, and this is the way in which all of these things intersect, and there's a subtlety and a nuance to that and how you manage that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think towards the end of the show, it was very much like, this is a show about a man who was blind,
Mm-hmm.
rather than like
Yeah.
a
Mm-hmm.
nuanced take of like human experience,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
but still an
Yeah.
enjoyable watch.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
and potentially like is it too high of a expectation to expect
I
Yeah.
think
from?
I think what might have been a little bit jarring, like it's a show that's like trying to be relatable, right? But it's ending up with something that is very unlikely and very unrelatable that just puts it like in cut in the middle kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I get why some people might just be fine with the ending like that. Happy endings are like a staple in
Mm-hmm.
anything, but I do think like when we're talking about disabilities like blindness and stuff, like it's more important to stay to um real life
Mm,
experience
Yeah,
rather,
I
and it
think,
would have been more impactful. It would have been
yeah.
a lot more impactful for the show to be more
Yeah.
realistic to
Yeah, I
the
think in a
ending.
show like this, the nuances become a lot more important than just like your everyday, like, a lot of the BLs that we're used to seeing, like the ones that are more like stereotypical, like you can kind of look past a lot of the nuances that might be overlooked. But I think in a show that was so focused heavily on the nuances for the majority of the run, feeling like they kind of got thrown out the window in the finale just to kind of pigeonhole that happy, fantastical, everyone gets what they wanted, I don't know, ending
Yeah.
in the end, just kind of like was like,
But my
oh, okay.
problem with this whole thing is like, oh, he gets his eyesight back, happy ending. But could like him not getting the eyesight back doesn't mean that it isn't a happy ending. That's
Mm-hmm.
the whole issue here.
And he
Like
was
it could
happy
have,
with he was happy in the
yes,
beginning of the episode. Like
yes. The whole thing,
so I'm
like
like,
the
why
whole
did
story is about him accepting his situation and learning that you can live life with blindness.
yeah,
It's not a unhappy thing. It's
yeah.
it's
yeah.
yeah.
There
I
were
think a
so
lot of
many moments. Go ahead,
sorry.
Freddie.
No, you go. No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say there were so many moments where Day acknowledges that he was living a more fulfilling life since meeting Malk and kind of coming to acceptance of losing his vision than he ever had before. And so like the way the ending kind of was like, but he gets his sight back and that's, what we really need for a happy ending for him was like, oh, okay, sure, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of pushback that I got on my reaction to the final episode was, people questioning like, why don't you want him to be
Be
happy, or like,
happy.
why don't
Mm-hmm.
why don't you want him to like have his sight back? He wants his sight back, so we should all be happy that he has his sight back. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very much like I'm so happy for him as a character that
Mm-hmm.
obviously I would
Yeah.
never want to deny anybody their sight, but in terms of serving the story and
The
serving
narrative.
the
The
Mm-hmm.
narrative and the
narrative.
piece of
Yeah.
media and also the community, and what a beautiful message. And as to your point, like what you said about he had been on such an acceptance journey,
Mm.
and it was so beautiful, like it was
Mm-hmm.
so moving, and then it just
Yeah.
felt like all of that got lost in this, again, a montage
Yeah.
at the end of like, I can now live a fulfilling life
Mm-hmm.
with this all in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
It's they call it ableist, that you need to like be completely um not have a disability to be happy, or like
Mm,
it's very yeah, no, I just don't I can't get over the fact that they like I wouldn't have guessed that that would be the ending. Like when I watching the
yeah.
show and looking like what kind of narrative they were pushing and everything, that
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be my guess
Mm-hmm.
for how it
How
would
it would have
end.
gone. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Since we're already like going in on the finale, to just kind of drive our point home,
Mm-hmm.
I need to read you an
Yep.
excerpt from Day's ending
Mm-hmm.
monologue because
Please do.
that was the part that my jaw dropped. I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
cannot believe this is the narrative they're pushing.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, I've always wondered how Me would live if she had a normal life. Life amidst the dilemma that caused me to forget what it was like to live a normal life or how happy I could be. I consider myself lucky to have gone past the worst page in my novel.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is really what the moment where I was like, what happened to the narrative? Like that
Yeah.
quote, like Day getting his vision back, having the surgery, being happy and having his vision back, like Freddie said, like I'm so happy for him in
Yeah.
that. Like if that's what he wanted, then yes, that's great for him. But I think that quote and where they placed it in the narrative of the finale, I think where they place it is also very important because I'm like, why is this the final thing that Day is saying like about everything we've been through on this journey? Why is it turning back to actually that was the worst page of my novel and now I'm past that. Um and
It
so I
made
know
it
like
sound like he was looking down
Yeah.
on people who
yeah,
were blind.
Yeah.
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 Like
And
he's like,
that
"Oh, I can see
scene,
now, so I'm better." That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
actually, that scene, the crosswalk scene, I found like actually quite in poor taste, and that's just my
Mhm.
take. But like
Mhm.
in combo with that monologue of like
Mhm.
I'm helping, and also the use of
Leading the
the
blind.
person on the crosswalk was using a cane,
Mhm.
which they had not been using, and then to help that person, it just
Yeah.
was
Mm.
a bit.
Uh,
Yeah,
Maybe a
he's
little
been learning to.
infantilizing in a way.
Yeah.
Mm,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole
I
point of the story is that they don't need like to be treated like children or
yeah,
be
yeah.
helped. It's
yeah,
not like yeah.
I
yeah.
know one of the responses I saw to people who are like really critical of that final quote was that he wasn't, like Day wasn't necessarily saying that. I guess what people were trying to say is that like the whole finale was meant to show Day living a normal life, both including, the beginning montage that we saw and the final part where he, has his vision back and they're going through that final montage. And my thought is like, if their intention was to say that Day living a normal life includes accepting his blindness and that portion of his life where he was living as a blind man and finding happiness in that, then they placed that quote in the wrong at the wrong point of the
Yeah.
finale. Like I
Mhm.
think if they wanted to go that route, they should have put it at the beginning where he was they could have easily put a quote of similar nature at that beginning montage where we saw him
Mhm.
achieving all of these things while blind. But I think
Mhm.
choosing to put it where they did, and like you said, Freddie, with him, leading this person who was blind across the street, like the placement of it in the finale, I think contributed to it feeling very disingenuous to the narrative. And I think placement of where you put things like that is just as important as other aspects of the narrative. And I think that is also what frustrated me.
Also, just like Dave referring to his time being blind as not normal,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
earlier in the series it was normal. So like
Mm-hmm.
when did the
Mm.
change happen where he was like, actually now that I can see, I'm living a normal life and I wasn't before.
Yeah. You know,
It's
it kind of
confusing.
feels like two different people wrote two like the parts of the
Yeah.
script. Like the
Yeah.
ending
I'm
was
like,
Yeah.
written
someone
by
who
someone
whoever wrote the
completely
finale
different.
did not have the rest of the script or something like that. I
No,
don't
like
know.
they did not read the beginning.
Mm.
I,
Yeah, I don't know.
It's
And
like
like,
him getting his sight back. Like it didn't feel like a bonus
no.
at the
mm-hmm,
end. It wasn't like, oh, I've like found myself, and then oh my god, this amazing thing has happened, and now I can
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm,
see, and I've learned so many lessons
mm-hmm,
through
Mm-hmm.
this ordeal. Because a lot of people were arguing, like he hasn't been blind from birth. It was
mm-hmm,
like, a traumatic incident that he wants to move
Yeah.
past. So valid and fair. But it's
Yeah.
like it didn't feel, it just felt like all of the lessons that he'd learned through the whole experience just didn't matter. And
mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
was like, oh, but it mattered to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Yeah,
mattered to lots of people.
exactly. Yeah, no. Yeah, and I'm like, obviously, there are a lot of people who enjoyed the finale, so like, this isn't to
Yeah.
take away from that. And like,
Mm.
Yeah.
obviously, these are just our own feelings about it, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
want it to feel like we're policing people to feel like they shouldn't have enjoyed what happened.
Of course, yeah.
Um, but at the same time, it's just like, I don't know, it just goes back to like the first like 9 or 10 episodes were just like I just felt like they were doing everything they wanted to do.
Mm.
And so for me, it just felt like, well, how did we lose the plot so quickly almost? Like, I don't know. It
Yeah.
just felt I felt like if I hadn't been so invested in what they were doing in the
Mm.
beginning portion of the show, I could have just accepted the finale for what it was.
100%.
Um, but because I felt so strongly about what they'd done so far and the message that they felt like they were giving with those first 9 or 10 episodes, it
Yeah.
just kind of felt like, well, this didn't have to be what it was. The finale could have
Mhm.
been something very different, and I feel like a lot of us could have envisioned what it could have been, and they kind of gave us a taste of what it could have been with that first part of the finale. And I'm almost like, I wish they hadn't even given me that, because like it
Mm.
could have been so much more than what it was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The
Yeah.
series actually ended at episode 9, I think.
Literally.
Literally. Yeah.
Literally. That would have
Yeah.
been like, I would have been happy if that was the final episode, honestly. Like it would have been such a better place to end in the journey, for me personally. But
Yeah.
Mm.
The
Mm-hmm.
we
last
live
three
and we
episodes were
learn.
actually to my sky, our sky.
Yeah, but yeah, we
Yeah.
they're not canon.
Yeah, they're not canon.
They're actually
Yeah.
just like a collective hallucination, I think.
Yeah.
I think of like the ending, or I guess the whole story, even from a writing perspective, it's just like when you have a theme in a story, you're supposed to stick to it.
Yeah.
So, what happened with
Hmm.
that?
What were
Like,
we
that's just
supposed
like
to
a
learn from
basic
this?
element of writing and storytelling.
Mm.
Hmm.
I don't know. Felt very
Yeah.
inconsistent. I don't know.
Yeah.
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 Well, that to say, I do really think like the first 9 episodes, even into part of 10, were such strong TV. And
Mm.
like I will always have a lot of love for Last Twilight as a whole. I feel like I'm just gonna
Mm.
like not acknowledge the finale, you know?
Same.
And of course, like Malk as a character, like I think, I don't know where I've said it, but I'm viewing him as like one of my all-time favorite BL
Mm.
characters,
Yeah.
despite the narrative doing him dirty in the end. I feel like the way his character was portrayed to me, he'll always be very dear to me. And so, despite him not getting the justice he deserved in the end, I feel like
Mm.
I'm very grateful to have gotten him as a character. So, there's still a lot of good that I'm glad we got from the show. And like, I, the finale changes things, but I also feel like for me, it doesn't completely undermine everything that I did enjoy about the show for the first part.
100%. And if this is where BL is going, and this is the kind of like
Mm.
caliber of show that we can expect like coming up, like let's go, like more of
Hmm.
this. Like obviously there's criticisms and I would have done things differently, but as you said, like rockin'.
Mm.
Rockin'. Yeah.
I've never said that
Mm-hmm.
before. I don't really know why I said
Rockin'. No,
that.
I love it.
Heather suggests to wrap up on a more positive note. Do we want to share a favorite scene or moment from the series so it's not all bad at the end?
Mm.
For me personally, I mentioned this in our Valentine's Day episode that we did recently. I love the scene before the party, the surprise party. We don't take that part of it into account. But when they're getting ready for the party and Day asks Malk what he's wearing, and Malk like has him like feel his outfit and feel like his accessories, and like it was such an intimate moment, and like you could feel the tension of like the growing feelings in that moment so well, that like always sticks out to me as like one of my, because I feel like, episode 9 finale, like that's a given like god tier moment from the show. But I feel like that scene before the surprise party and like the heightened tension and feelings in that moment is such like an underrated like favorite moment of mine. And I just, whenever I think back on it, I'm just like, oh, I could feel it, I could feel everything they were feeling.
Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a standout for me.
Mm-hmm. The one scene I always think of, and I even went back to watch again, is the one with the fish tank. Whenever they're
Yeah.
staring at each other through it, and he says like the little Day quote. Well, I can't remember what the quote was, but it really hit me.
Like
I
little
was
Day
like,
won't be lonely anymore.
yeah,
Like, no, he won't
it
be.
was so good. Just like the way they didn't even have to say anything. It was just the way that they stared at each other, like through the tank and then kind of
Mm-hmm.
like peeking around it. And a lot of that has to do with just like how good their acting was, like
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
intimately in that moment. It was so good. I always think about that scene.
Yeah.
I also love the scene where Day thought that Mock was asleep, and he does the
Mm-hmm.
like palm distance.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, it was so bananas. It was so bananas. And then I think every moment where Mock is like smiling at Day, like he is the best thing that's
Mm-hmm.
like ever graced the earth. And like the sweet deliciousness of knowing that Day can't see that.
Doesn't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Peak
One of,
romance.
one of the things that really like sat with me after watching, like, this is literally the first episode, but just how when they're doing the whole discussion if Mock is gonna be the caregiver, and Mock is keeps talking directly to Day and everyone else is talking over Day. Like, no
Mm,
one, like, they're talking about him like he's not even there, but
mm,
Mock is like directly talking to Day and the only one who does that. And that just really, yeah.
yeah.
Also, when Mock like puts the blindfold on himself and like walks around the market.
Oh my god.
In his fart shirt.
He was so well intentioned in his
So
fart
good.
shirt. Yeah. So
I also just have to mention whenever they show Mock in Hawaii and he's wearing
oh,
the
the
backwards
cap.
hat
Oh
with
Lord,
the
Jimmy.
chef outfit, that scene was
Jimmy.
good too.
I actually can't talk about it.
Anyway.
Also, one more that I have to mention. The changing room scene, episode 4, the
Oh,
electricity in
yeah.
that moment.
And the
I
way that
have
Mock
never
was like really
recovered.
bashful in that
Oh
moment
my
as
god, he
well.
was so.
I'm like sweating.
Same.
So as you can see, I feel like there's still a lot of good and a lot of positive feelings to take away from the
Yeah.
show. Like, I feel like there's still so many moments that were impactful. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of feelings in general around Last Twilight. I think we got a lot of them out today, but I feel like there's still even more that I could go into in more detail. Maybe that's a whole nother section, a whole nother episode or offshoot. But yeah, to wrap it up, thank you so much for joining us today, Freddie, and
It's been a
sharing your
joy.
opinions with us and your feelings. It was very nice to, I don't know, is commiserate the right word about sharing our feelings about Last Twilight. So yeah, I'm glad we got to sit down and do this.
Yeah, no, it's honestly been such a pleasure. I said to you guys before, but I've been a long time listener, so I'm having my own little fanboy moment right now. So this has been so
Aw.
great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. We'll put all of Freddie's links in the description, of course. So if you're not already following them, make sure to check out their TikTok, their YouTube, their Patreon. They're doing a lot of good content. And also share your thoughts about Last Twilight with us in the comments. I know it's going to be one, I think, where we'll all be reading the comments to see what everyone's feeling, because I think there's going to be a lot of feelings in the comments on this episode. But we're really curious to see what you've all got to say about it. So yeah, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all the fun things for the algorithm, and check out all of our social and Patreon links in the description as well. We're doing a lot of cool stuff on our socials and on Patreon, so we'll love to have you guys there as well. But that's all for this episode, and we will see you guys in another one soon. Bye bye.